we have lots of activities. So by the first hour, it's our great pleasure to start with Dr. Jeffry Oktavianus, right? I haven't actually pronounced your last name before. Yeah. And I think Jeffrey is one of my proud students. He graduated from the IMEX program, and I think he had very strong drive and then motivated to get a PhD. So after the IMEX, and he went to City University of Hong Kong for the doctoral degree. And you achieved that goal within 4 years.
3 years.
Right? 3 years. Yeah, 3 years, and then finish the dissertation. And this is one of the paper that he has produced, produced with another students of mine, right? Also study in CTU. And so his specialty, I would say, he has a very variety in interest, and he used to be the reporter, account executive in the media group. So I would say his hometown is in Indonesia. So his research interest focuses on the new media and the social change. And right now, I think he talked about crisis, and then social mobilization, politics, and health will be something that he would like to pursue continuously for his future research. And then today he's going to share the social media mobilization in Indonesia as the topic. And I think we will give him very warm welcome to share his paper and his research experiences with us. Let's give him a big hand.
Thank you very much, Professor Lane, for the introduction and for having me today. Good afternoon, everyone. Before we proceed, let me try to share my screen first. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so once again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. It's certainly always a pleasure to be able to talk in NCCU, and I do notice that I can see some familiar faces and some fellow Indonesians there. So today, in this very happy occasion, I would like to actually tell you the story about my country, Indonesia, and how social media has been utilized to mobilize the masses to engage in so-called online collective actions.
Mm-hmm.
As some of you may have been aware that the emergence of new media technologies, especially social media, has created opportunities for individuals to participate in issues that they concern, let it be in politics, social, and other aspects of society. Social media can facilitate engagement for individuals that otherwise would not participate to take action by offering new forms of participations. For instance, we may have experienced that now we can sign petitions online or express our opinions on digital platforms and many others. People also spend little effort to participate as participation is now just like several clicks away, and also it is relatively more cost efficient. More importantly, social media has the ability to reach wide public swiftly and allows people to coordinate protests or collective actions. Some affordances of social media also make movement or collective actions become easier to unfold. For instance, on Twitter, people can use certain hashtag to convey their concerns and idea. And embedding the hashtag allows people to unify their attention, which makes it easier for individuals to access their advocated issues and build a network with others people having a similar concern. You may have known some successful hashtag activisms such as Me Too movement or Black Lives Matter that go viral these recent years. These successful online activisms has been seen useful in increasing awareness of an issue. Some of them also translate into a real action. For example, in the Me Too movement, people also march on the street under the same campaign. Yet, despite the benefits, these collective actions through social media are not devoid of criticisms. For instance, social media are also utilized to coordinate violent collective actions, such as the riot that happened in London in 2011 following a death of a local man murdered by the police. The rioters used social media such as Facebook, Twitter, and BlackBerry Messenger to promote the riots and mobilize the masses. Aside from that, some scholars coin different kinds of terms, including selectivism, collectivism, armchair activism, and so on. And the main critique is that people support an issue or a cause, but they actually put minimal effort there. And hence, it is seen as a superficial participation and it produces different benefits, which are comparatively less powerful than offline participation. Yet, despite these critics, social media is still proven to be a powerful tool to mobilize the masses. However, the success of the online campaign depends on various factors, and one of them is the strategy utilized by the organizers. For example, one that I would like to bring today is the framing, as many scholars have argued that it is important to frame the messages to persuade and coordinate participants. Framing itself is understood as the selection of some aspects of an issue to promote a particular problem definition, causal interpretation, moral evaluation, and treatment recommendation. So by purposefully selecting a certain aspect of an issue, people can bring the attention of the public to the advocated issue, direct public opinion, and build a shared understanding and grievances, which are crucial to mobilizing the public, garnering more support, and also disarming the opposition. Scholars have also identified three different frames that commonly used in collective actions. The first one is called diagnostic frame, which focuses on identification of the problems and who should be blamed for the problem. The second one is prognostic frame, which proposes solutions or remedies to the problem. And the last one is motivational frame, which concerns the reason why people should participate in collective action, and thus it is essential to mobilize the people. So in today's session, we will further discuss how social media, especially Twitter, can be utilized to facilitate collective action. In particular, we will talk about the message characteristics of online collective actions, including the framing process. Moreover, we will also discuss what kind of message attributes that can garner higher public engagement, an indicator of successful campaigns. To illustrate the mobilization process in collective action, I will talk about two cases in Indonesia. I will focus on Indonesia not only because it is my home country, but this nation is also known as a social media giant with more than 170 million social media users. On top of that, this country is still in the top 5 leading nation on Twitter, producing billions of tweets, and the capital, Jakarta, is once known as the world's most active city on Twitter. Social media has also been integral in the lives of Indonesians, including me, and the development of the country's democracy. People can attend social media to express their opinion, and thus it can facilitate the mobilization of mass rallies, which is healthy for democracy. However, Indonesia also has some so-called rubber national laws, which may limit freedom of speech. One of them is the implementation of the Electronic Information and Transaction, or ITE law, or we can also call it cyber law, which stipulates several provisions on personal defamations, online threats, and religious blasphemy, and contains some vague and multi-interpretation points. Therefore, it is often used to catch and penalize offenses on digital platforms. One of the famous examples is the case of Prita Mulyasari, a mother which became the first person charged by the law for defaming a hospital in Jakarta after sending a private email complaining about her bad experience at the hospital. The hospital lawyer accused Prita for violating the IT law, and she was detained in May 2009 and was ordered to pay a fine of 204 million rupiah. Her case went viral and was covered by many media outlets. And her case also shows how powerful social media for mobilizing the public in the country, as online users were outraged after learning that a nursing mother was jailed for sending a private email complaint. So they started a social media campaign called Prita, a coin for Prita, to collect coins to pay the fine of Prita. The movement went viral and they collected over 6 tons of coins worth over 850 million rupiah, far exceeding her fine, 204 million rupiah. The public pressure also led the release of Prita. Hence, here we can see from her case that the online social movement has the ability to change the public policy and transform to offline actions. However, today I would like to talk about two other cases. The first one is called Uninstall Gojek. In case you don't know, Indonesia is the largest Muslim majority country in the world, and the refusal toward the LGBTQ community remains strong in the country, and even the strongest compared to their counterpart in Asia, according to Pew Research. Therefore, the public were outraged when one of the executives of Gojek, a big online transportation company similar to Uber, if you know it, posted on Facebook promoting the company's anti-discriminatory policy toward LGBT employees. The post that I show you today sparked a public furor on Twitter as many citizens expressed their disappointment toward Gojek using the hashtag #UninstallGojek that later became a trending topic on the platforms. Using the hashtag, the citizens encourage other Indonesians to boycott the company. However, now social media enables people with dissenting views to express their opinion, which is reflected in the movement. As interestingly, using the same hashtag, many Twitter users express their disagreement with the protesters for their attitude and unfair treatments toward Gojek and the LGBT community. Therefore, both groups engaged in the online Twitter debate and articulated their frame stance to attract and mobilize other Indonesians to their respective causes. Given this interesting context, my colleagues and I attempted to investigate the nature of the online movement by identifying different stances and actors involved in the movements and the frames employed by the participants. We then collected tweets during the hashtag uninstall Gojek for around a month in 2018 using the Twitter Firehose Crimson Hexagon. After cleaning the data and removing irrelevant tweets, we have 5,556 tweets for further analysis. And there are three main codes we analyzed in this study. The first one is the stance, whether they are protesters or anti-Gojek or LGBT groups, whether they are counter-protesters who are against the anti-LGBT group, and those who did not show any stances. The second code was the source, whether the tweets came from the citizens, public figures, civil organizations, government agencies, or news outlets. And the last one was the frames, whether they used diagnostic, prognostic, and motivational frames. The findings showed that, interestingly, while the hashtag was first utilized to boycott the company, 57.8% of the tweets were mainly posted by the counter-protesters. There was also an arguably substantial number of tweets that did not indicate any stances, which accounted for 25.7% of the total tweets. Unexpectedly, messages by the protesters took the least portion with only 917 tweets. The findings also indicated that ordinary citizens dominated the conversation, which is expected as the campaign was first initiated by the citizens. We also found the presence of news organizations, public figures, and also civil organizations, but we did not find the presence of government agencies in the tweets. The findings also revealed that more than half of the tweets posted by the citizens and public figures countered the protesters as they defended Gojek or LGBT groups, which is contrary to the expectation that citizens would mainly engage in conversations to protest, given that the protests initially emerged to boycott the company. On the other hand, the messages from news organizations and civil organizations probably took neutral stances as they did not exhibit any tendency to support both protesters and counter-protesters. Regarding the frames, we found that the protesters frequently employed motivational frames in their messages. They particularly spread messages about their own protest participation by attaching pictures of their phone screen showing that they had uninstalled Gojek application in hope that others will jump into the bandwagon. The protesters also provided reasons to join the movement, such as maintaining a positive society. They believed that LGBTQ was wrong and should not be supported, and hence they invited others to participate in the movement in order to protect the society. Some protesters also blame the LGBT community for Indonesia's natural disasters, and thus, according to this stance, deviant sexual behavior should be eradicated to avoid this heavenly punishment. And here is the example of the tweets. I hope it's big enough so you can read it. Aside from motivational frame, many protesters also use diagnostic frame to lay out the problems of the LGBTQ community and why homosexuality was wrong. They mainly talk about negative traits of the LGBT people, like how they were perverts, diseased individuals, and were the cause of HIV/AIDS. Protesters also stated that homosexuality was morally unacceptable and it is also deviated from Indonesia's culture, like the second tweet I showed here. Lastly, a small number of tweets from protesters promoted solutions such as encouraging others to install other brands or take other transportation modes, as well as asking Gojek to make an official clarification or apology and fire the employee who made the statement. However, unlike the protesters, more than half of the tweets from the counter protesters, those who were against the anti-Gojek and LGBT group, utilized diagnostic frames to identify the problems of the protests. For instance, many of them talk about negative characteristics of the anti-Gojek or LGBT protesters. They consider them as people who are conservative, stupid, short-tempered, and exhibited other negative traits. People who were against the protesters also mentioned that the protest was invalid as the executive of Gojek's post did not represent the culture of the views of the company as a whole. Also, there were other more urgent issues such as sexual harassment case concerning Gojek competitor, which did not receive much public attention. They also considered sexual orientation as a personal matter, and the protesters should not invade others' people's privacy. Around 40.1% of the counter-protesters' tweets also employed motivational frames to persuade others to reconsider their stances and refrain from uninstalling the application. They appealed others to keep using the service for mainly two reasons. The first one emphasized on the positive benefits of using the service, such as discount, excellent services, and others. The second one focused on negative consequences of uninstalling the application, particularly the possibility of massive layoff for the millions of Gojek drivers. Aside from that, similar to the protesters, the counter-protesters exhibited individual participation, particularly stating that they would keep using the service. And lastly, apart from motivational and diagnostic frames, the counter-protesters also utilize prognostic frame by offering alternative solutions to the issue, including suggesting the protesters to uninstall other brands supporting the LGBT community and recommending Gojek to provide additional incentives such as discount to re-attract the users. Interestingly, we also find a pretty substantial number of tweets that did not show any stance, such as they mainly tell joke and making fun of these people that involved in the protests. Some of the tweets also tweeted information or updates about the protests, and some even tried to seek information about what is actually happening. So, in a nutshell, this study demonstrates the complexity of online collective action and digital communication ecology, as there are multiple stances and actors involved in a social movement. Social media also allows framing contests, as groups with contrasting views can employ different framing strategies to push their agenda and mobilize the public to their cause. It is also interesting to see the prominence of counter-protesters, as it shows the possibility of social media to counter the so-called spiral of silence, if you ever heard about that. As we can see that the voice of a rather minority groups dominates the message in the movement. This situation may also occur as although abuses toward LGBT community run rampant in the country, activism advocating sexual minority groups' rights has also increased in recent years. However, it is noteworthy that counter-protesters are also not necessarily supporters of LGBT group, but more of a loyal Gojek customer. And another notable finding it is also the use of different framing strategies between protesters and counter-protesters, which could occur as each stance had their own goals to achieve, and therefore they use different frames to push their agenda. I will discuss this further after sharing the second study, which is still related, but at the same time it is also different, especially in terms of the context. Because in the second study, I focus on a citizen-driven anti-terrorism movement in Indonesia. So Indonesia has a long list of bombing incidents, and the government has put countless efforts in protecting the nation from terrorism using military approach. However, these past years, the Indonesian government has slightly changed its strategy as they also involve participation of citizens. However, the online anti-terrorism campaigns are initiated not only by the government, but also the citizens voluntarily. And one of them is the Kami Tidak Takut or We Are Not Afraid campaign that exploded on social media and became a trending topic on Twitter when bombs and shootouts took place in the center of Jakarta in 2016. This online movement also transformed offline as the following day, hundreds of people went to the street to pray for the victims and gave flowers to people passing by on the road under the Kami Tidak Takut campaign. Since then, the movement consistently emerged after terrorist attacks such as the 2017 Kampung Melayu bombings and the 2018 Surabaya bombings. In this study, I mainly focus on the latest Kami Tidak Takut campaign in 2018, which took place after a family of five, a married couple with their three kids, detonated suicide bombs on three churches in Surabaya, Indonesia, during Sunday masses on May 2018. The incident killed 12 people and injured over 40 people. This is also the first incident involving female bombers and children in Indonesia. Similar to the first study, I would like to understand the message characteristics of the collective action. On top of that, I would like to also identify influential message attributes that can attract high public engagement. Past studies such as the theoretical framework of Yale model of persuasion have argued that there are various message factors that may be more persuasive and effective in altering people's attitudes and behavior. Some of them include the frame that we have discussed earlier, the sentiment or the tone of the message, whether it is positive, negative, or neutral, and accompaniments like whether the message attach photos, videos, or URLs, and finally the source of the message. I will particularly focus on analyzing how this message features influence users' engagement, which is a central element in collective action as movement emerges after participants share mutual engagement. In the digital platform, particularly Twitter, engagement can be measured by users' experiences such as likes or favorites and retweets. These Twitter features indicate validations of someone's opinion, and the retweet function also allows the users to broadcast content to their circle and increases content exposure. Thus, it is crucial to understand the factors that influence public engagement, as it can be one of the indicators of a success of the campaign. So in this study, I used Python library to harvest tweets during the hashtag #KamiTakut for around 2 weeks in May 2018. And after cleaning the data and eliminating irrelevant tweets, I have over 21,000 tweets and randomly selected 10,000 for further analysis. As I have mentioned earlier, I have four main codes analyzed in this study. The first one is frames, and the findings show that the participants commonly employed, again, motivational frames. So many citizens encourage others to engage in collective actions to show the terrorists that they were not afraid of the bombs. They also highlighted their common identity as Indonesians and the need to unite the nations and end terrorism. Similar to previous study, prognostic frames or messages promoting solutions took the least portion with roughly 12.7%. In terms of the sentiment, I do not only analyze whether the tones are positive, negative, and neutral, but also the object that the sentiment is directed to, as emotion comes of because of a reason, and therefore it should be projected toward a certain object. And the finding revealed that the tweets were primarily positive or supportive and were directed toward the anti-terrorism campaigns, as many messages expressed their support for the campaign. Positive tweets also talk about victims, especially sending prayers or support and admiring the fallen police officers or those who attempted to block the terrorists from entering the churches and save other visitors. Concerning negative tweets, they were projected toward terrorist groups, government, victims, mass media, and religious leaders, organizations that spread radical ideologies. Interestingly, there were also tweets criticizing the movement as well, mainly about how the campaign was actually not effective in combating terrorism and reducing the adverse effect of the attacks, as terrorist attacks still occur, although they had posted the hashtag in every after terrorist incidents. The third code, accompaniments, show that most messages did not have any accompaniments, followed by images, URLs, and a small number of videos. And lastly, as expected, the tweets mainly come from the citizens, followed by civil society organizations, government agencies, news outlets, and also public figure. I also run a series of Kruskal-Wallis tests to analyze how these message features influence user engagement, which is a combination of a matrix of retweets and favorites. And the findings showed that diagnostic frames and motivational frames were able to generate more user engagement than prognostic frame. So if you posted a message like encouraging others to join the movement, telling the reasons why you participate in the movements, it is more likely to be retweeted or liked by other people. In terms of sentiments, messages with positive or negative tones attracted more engagement. So there is an emotional tones in the message, and it is more likely to be liked or retweeted in a movement. While for accompaniments, photos and videos appear to be more favorable. So as long as you attach multimedia content on the tweets, it is more likely to be retweeted or liked. Lastly, public figures and civil society organizations garnered greater engagement than other sources. So, what are the main takeaways from these studies? Well, first, different groups of publics may have different agendas or concerns that they would like to advocate, and therefore they may use different frames to achieve their goals. We can also observe in both studies that the participants mainly use motivational frames. The prominence of motivational frames demonstrate the ability of social media to facilitate mobilization, as the digital platform can be utilized to promote the movement and encourage others to participate in collective action. It may happen as digital platforms reduce cognitive and logistical costs, and thus it is more accessible for individuals to be involved in collective action. The dominant presence of motivational frames posted by citizens are also helpful in persuading people to join the effort, as it's been known that peer recommendation is more powerful in altering people's attitude and behaviors, and hence significant numbers of motivational frames may potentially increase people's support and involvement in the movement. In both studies, we also discover a substantial number of tweets employing diagnostic frames, and this finding implies that the participants might have clear definitions of the problems of the movement, which could affect the sustainability of the collective action, as if people have limited understanding of the main purpose of the movement, the collective action may not last long. Another similarity of both studies is the minimal presence of prognostic frames, which is somehow concerning as it shows that while the citizens are mobilized, they may not understand the solution. Therefore, the main problem may not be addressed appropriately as it is unclear what they should do to tackle the issue. Concerning the influential message characteristics, it is interesting to find that diagnostic frame and motivational frames are superior compared to prognostic frames. This probably happens because in times of crisis especially, people need information to cope with the situation and uncertainty engendered by the crisis, and therefore diagnostic frame garnered more engagement. In terms of sentiment, messages with emotional tones, no matter it is positive or negative, attracted more engagement compared to the neutral one. However, negative messages seem to be more influential in provoking engagement, and it also has been known that emotional appeal is always have a persuasive effect in a message. Aside from that, I also find that public figures and civil society organizations attract more engagement compared to other sources. Public figures have been known to have high visibility on social media, and they usually have a high number of followers. Hence, their presence and the content can attract public attention in social movement. In times of crisis, civil society organizations were also considered trustworthy by the public. Thus, these groups have a greater likelihood of receiving higher engagement. Lastly, multimedia content such as photos and videos in the tweets appear to be more favorable. Visual support has the ability to increase people's attention to social media content, which in turn leads to higher intentions for message sharing. Hence, future campaigns may want to disseminate messages using diagnostic and prognostic frame with negative or positive tones and embedding pictures and involve public figures to spread the message, as this may be more effective in mobilizing the public to engage in online movement, although the causal relationship should be further tested using an experiment in the future. So I think that's all I can share for today. I hope today's talk can give you some insights about mobilization of online collective action in Indonesia. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know and I'll try my best to answer them. And thank you very much once again for your attention.
I think we have two very good studies and out of the Twitter right analysis. And so maybe I can ask the first question and then that the classmates, your students thinking about what you have in mind. Because they are Twitter studies. So how about just share your experiences if the students here would like to do something similar? What would you share your experiences? And you mentioned about some tools, and yeah, how to do that.
Okay. So for
Maybe
Twitter,
can have your face,
oh yeah.
or just thank you, then we can see you. Okay,
Okay.
great. Thanks.
So for data collection, especially for Twitter, actually like in my university we have subscribed to like a certain service, but if you know like how to write or code on Python, there are actually like many libraries that can like help you to like mine or harvest tweets, including historical data like from some time ago. And now Twitter also has like a Twitter academic API. So you can apply for this Twitter academic and then you can like collect tweets conveniently. Um, in the past, I also use like digital research method from University of Amsterdam. They have like a digital method initiative, and they like publish their tools that you can use. This is like more user friendly tools, but it is also limited. If I'm not mistaken, they have like some tools for YouTube videos and Instagram. So you can check the Digital Initiative Method or Digital Method Initiative, if I'm not mistaken, by University of Amsterdam. So I think like for Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, as long as it's like Facebook pages, it's kind of like easier to harvest as long as you have ability to code on Python or you have someone that can help you with Python. But in the recent uh, months, we are also interested in analyzing TikTok videos because like TikTok is such a huge trend. Actually, like at the moment, we also have difficulties to mine TikTok data because TikTok has a very great anti-scrapping walls. So like technicians of TikTok, when they find a library for like scrapping TikTok data, they always like try to block it. So so for now, what we do, like we buy the data. So you need to spend some money if you're interested, or you can manually collect the data. So you can just like check the hashtag or the keywords that you want, and then manually collected the data one by one. So I hope this is helpful.
So this is the data collection. So how about the analysis or data cleaning, and then what to actually pay attention to? Because when you have the data, that's a gigantic amount of contents. How are you going to think about how to analyze and interpret?
Okay, so for data cleaning first, once we collected data, we need to do data cleaning. It really depends of like what you are actually would like to clean. Like for me, I always try to clean irrelevant tweets because in Twitter especially there were like lots of advertisements or like topics that actually do not talk about it. And because the data that I use are commonly Indonesians, there is like no purpose to like automatically analyze like Indonesian language. So I need to do like manually read one by one all the tweets and then like remove the tweets that like I don't want to use it. But if it's like in English, there are also like a lot of like corpus that can help you automatically um, like identify tweets after you supervise it. So that's what I do for data cleaning. And you can also need you if you are doing tweets, you also need to think if like you want to focus only on original tweets or retweets, because sometimes when you mine tweets, they also collected retweets and therefore like a loss of like duplications, because like one message, for instance, can be retweeted for 1,000, and then you find like 80,000 tweets, but then actually like half of them are retweets. So you also may want to consider whether you want to remove these tweets or not. And for the data analysis, um, again, it's similar to manual analysis because I don't have the kind of like corpus to automatically supervise Indonesian tweets. So I do manual analysis. But if you have, you can, if you have tweets in English, you can use like supervised topic modeling to like help you automatically like uh, analyze the tweets. But regardless, like you are using computer or like you are using yourself, it's very important to also develop the coding scheme. Like what are you actually interested in understanding, or like what you are interested in identifying. For me, for instance, like in the first study, I have three codes: the frames, the source, and then the what is the other one? Oh, the stances. Yeah, the stances. So where do you get the idea of like what kind of frames or what kind of stances that you do? Well, you can get the codes after reading the tweets. So open coding, we call it. You read the tweets and you see what pattern that usually like emerge, and then you create the pattern. Or you can actually borrow the coding schemes from other like studies. For instance, there are like some studies that have talked about collective action framings, and you can see like what kind of themes that they have analyzed, what kind of codes that they analyze, and you can adopt it in your studies. And perhaps when you analyze, you find new codes, then you can just add it and modify the existing coding scheme. So that's like how we do it, or I do it.
Okay, thanks for sharing. So the last question about the method. What kind of topic you feel like most suitable to use this sort of Twitter analysis, and why motivate you to do this? It sounds like lots of work, time consuming, right? But why you do it? How to make it better? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like my very research interest is about crisis management. And then most of like crisis communications always borrow the perspective of organizations, like what they can do or like what the organizations would like to do. But then like it's very important for us to also like find the perspective of our audience from the public, because in creating a campaign you need to know your audience, you need to know what their needs, and you need to know what their concerns about. And hence like the only way to like understand this public discourse or like the narratives is like by like analyzing this social media data. Certainly we can do interviews, we can do like survey, but then like analyzing social data, social media data, we get like a real time and observation, which is like also like unintrusive, like it's a natural data and natural observations, and hence although it's exhausting, but we can get meaningful insights from like the social media data analysis. That's like my perspective.
Well, that's great answer. So I do see you learn so much and then grow so much over the 3 years. Okay, I'll open the floor. Anyone who has any interesting questions or you have things you want to clarify? Real.
Hi, Jeffrey.
Oh, hello.
It's a wonderful study and nice to know you. My name is Rio and I'm from Indonesia too. Selamat siang, Jeffrey. Yeah, I really want to learn a lot from you. And what's your strategy to conduct the study relates to this topic? Because your study is about the collective action in social media. How do they relate to their real life? Because I also want to share that Surabaya is my hometown, and I was there. It was a beautiful Sunday until the bomb and the television all about the news all about the bombing. And I also created a campaign for my company about that hashtag. And even I create a campaign for that. I feel so afraid because of the bombing. And I remember that time even the schools closed for 3 days after the bombing event. And when I created that campaign, everyone, even no, I mean myself and my family and also my friend feel so afraid for that. So how to conduct study really relates to their real life.
Um, okay, that's very great question. To be honest with you, like similar to you, I actually also experienced the 2016 bombing in Jakarta. What happened to us? Like, so like I was also kind of the bystander at the time, and that's probably like one of like motivation that garnered me um like motivate me to actually starting to analyze terrorist attacks. Actually, I started analyzing the 2017 terrorist attacks with Professor Lin for my master's thesis, and I keep going until now. So I think like for me personally, especially if you are a bystander, it's certainly very hard to analyze the tweets because you may kind of like get emotional um, when you are reading the tweets because like to be honest with you, especially there are like lots of photos. So sometimes they share the photos of the victims, sometimes they share the photos of the location, and like you can get too emotional when you are like analyzing the tweets manually. If you think that this is like something that you may not you may encounter, I would suggest then hire or like ask somebody else to like help you like analyze the tweets. For instance, I in both studies we need to have like intercoded reliability, right? So like I have another person to help me to analyze the tweets, and I will test the intercoded reliability. But it is also very possible that like you don't need to analyze the tweets, but you hire two people to help you analyze the tweets. So you're kind of like detached from like analyzing. So you just focus on the analysis. Um, so I think, and actually, like if you already, for me, if you actually experience your research in your real life, it is actually much better in terms of like writing the papers because you already know the background, you already know like the context. So it is, you are like more sensitive to like the questions and the findings, and it's actually easier to write the results and then write the literature, for instance, because you have like prior knowledge about the issues. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's inspiring.
So Jeffrey, you talk about sentiment, right? Because the second study you mentioned about sentiment issue. I believe you are using the manual analysis. So
Right.
how are you going to decide what is positive, negative, and neutral? Because always, if put into the big data like the platform, people question about the algorithm to calculate. But for the manually, how can you do a more impartial work to design?
Okay. So there are, yeah, that's a very interesting question, and that's also like a very important question because sentiment is also very objective. But in analyzing it, we have two layers of analysis. The first one, we see the general pictures. When we say positive, it is also like messages that's supportive. When we say it's negative, it is also messages that's critical. If it's not either supportive or critical, then it's gonna be neutral. So that's like the main content or like the main meaning of the message that we try to seek. If we still have difficulties, we have kind of like a dictionary containing like words, corpus containing words that indicate positive and negative sentiments. So we kind of check like the keywords. For instance, like if the message contains a word like uh, let's say words containing like happy, and then we check the core when we are not sure whether like happy means like positive or negative, we check our like dictionary, this corpus, and see if like this word is included in positive or negative sentiment. So that's like the two things. First, understand the overall meaning. If we cannot get it, then we can grab like some words, important words in the tweets, and then see if this word is like, and check the dictionary and see if this word falls into the category of positive or negative. Because technically, if I'm not mistaken, when we are doing computational method as well, when we are doing a sentiment analysis using like automatic, they're also like using certain dictionary, so we can just like check the dictionary to like see.
So you are doing like Indonesian language translation to English and check the dictionary for you?
Yes.
Okay, wow.
Yes.
That's,
Yeah.
I praise praise your achievement in doing all this. Yeah. What else? Any question?
No,
Oh, okay. Okay. Who is asking question? Okay, Claudia.
I raised my hand.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have like very quick question. Maybe is like a Twitter a dominant social media in your country for such movements, or like Twitter is just in a field of your interests?
Oh, that's a very great question. First of all, like Twitter used to be like a dominant social media, but then later on, like people also use Facebook and Instagram to like, because like now Facebook and Instagram can also use a certain hashtag. But why I particularly use Twitter, to be honest with you, because it is easier to collect the data. So, and it is also like faster because when we are talking about Twitter, we mainly talk about text. But then when we are talking about Instagram or YouTube videos, we do like a multi-modal analysis because we may not only like analyze the text, but we also need to consider the photos or videos there. Because so that's why like it's gonna be like more layers of analysis that we need to do. So aside from the data collections, which is easier, the data analysis is also easier if like we do tweets, but this should not be like your main motivation. Um, I will certainly like suggest to also like analyze other platforms or even like compare different kinds of platforms.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Any other questions? Okay. Anything on the floor? Okay, if you don't have any question, because I think they are all very young. And then I think 5 years ago, I think Jeffrey, you said in not the same room, but also similar situation, because you took the new media conversion course, right? So now they are going to propose their first jet, in a group. So can you probably just refresh your memory and thinking about for the more like younger and the new, researcher, what's your suggestion for them to thinking about the research project that can be achieved in one semester? And after that, what they should do to help it become even more valuable?
Okay. From my very own personal experience, I think like for me personally, the hardest like step in like conducting a research is finding the topics because we don't know like whether the topic is good enough, whether we don't know like whether the topic is actually valuable, and even like sometimes we don't know what we should do. So I think like for me personally, if you encounter kind of like similar situation with me, don't know what to research, the easier way is like to read news, like understanding what is actually happening right now and what is like what kind of event that is like happening. Because like for instance, when we are talking about the first collective action, the first study that I analyzed, it actually comes after like I read news and see that like people are like debating, and I was like, oh, it's actually interesting that people can use Twitter to actually debate, because most studies focuses only one position, whether they protest or like whether they counter protest, but rarely talks about like how different views analyze different views debate in Twitter. So that's like how I find the topic. Or the second one is reading news journal articles. Aside from reading like the theories, usually what I read is also like the last paragraph of the articles. Yeah, future recommendations, and also like also
Research, future studies, right?
yeah. Right. So you can like see what the research gap that hasn't been addressed by previous studies, or like future recommendations by previous scholars. So like you can like find the topic. And in terms of like time management, we know that this is a very short like time to conduct research in one semester, but it is certainly not impossible, because I personally feel that the one that is very time consuming is usually the data collection and the data analysis. So to save the time, certainly we can do like this content analysis, because we can collect the data really quick, but then like the data analysis may take time. Yet you can just like focuses on a certain sampling. For instance, in my second study, I have like 20,000 tweets, and I certainly cannot do that like all. So like I randomly selected some sampling. Certainly do like random sampling, which is like better and more acceptable, and think like what you can do. And then in the future, for instance, like now you do 5,000 first, and then after you finish the course, if you think like you have time, you can develop it again and then like publish it somewhere else. So don't stop like until the project ends, but like stop it when you can present it in a conference or like publish it. And also like now, if you're interested more in like survey or yeah, survey, especially there are like lots of secondary data set. You can check like Taiwan Communication Survey or Pew Research. They like share like the data set for free, and then you can just like analyze. So you save like time and also like money to collect the data. I hope some tips helps. These tips help.
I believe they do, be inspired by that. And I think Jeffrey's group is only the first one and the only one over my past 5 years teaching new media convergence to accomplish a project and present it in international conference. and they managed to go to ITS Tokyo. No, not Kyoto.
Kyoto,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And they did something about Pokemon non-adoption, right?
Right.
Interesting.
Pokemon Go. Gotta catch them up.
So it's like within a class, you may collect a small number of people, the interviewees, and then later on you can, do more and polish your paper and thinking about conference to present. That will be something I feel like will be value added for you. Okay. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, and we will see you again, right? For
Right.
another topic and see how, versatile that he has so much to share with us. And let's just take a group picture and then we can have 10 minutes break after this. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you.